remember like chapter 2? Like,
I
kinda.
read
You read it? Okay.
it. I what I did, I don't know if I can show you. I put like, I got the little tabby things,
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and because I highlighted so much stuff, and I'm like, well, I can highlight it all day long. I'm just gonna highlight the entire book. That's not gonna help.
Yeah.
So I got like little the little paper tabs just to kind of write like little highlight things that would kind of jog my memory so I can like flip to the page pretty quickly
Okay,
or have an idea of like where I want to go,
right.
or little places that I highlighted that I maybe like would want to talk about, or even if I have the the book in hand later on, and be like, oh, it's on like, I'm not gonna remember where everything is in the book and what page it's all on and all that stuff.
Okay. Ah,
So
so
that was my own homework for the week, was to go through and kind of read it and highlight it and tab it and give myself some quick notes, I guess. Because I was
okay.
trying to like write down things like questions I might like want to say or things I'd want to bring up, but again, I'm just like, I might as well just read the book online. There's so many good things to point out.
I know that's the problem. That's the problem. You know, when I was reading, it's like, that's like, yeah. Oh yeah, that's another one, good one. Oh wait, that
Uh-huh.
sentence was good too. Oh no, the whole paragraph is fucking good.
Yeah, it's so hard to pick like one tiny little bit because yeah, I've highlighted quite a bit. So
Yeah. But I would say, a general summary of chapter 2, because just the title alone gives you an idea what it's talking about. It's our
yeah,
co-evolution with dogs, from wild wolves to willful pets kind of thing. And basically, it's going through a historical look, as in, the debate in question, which some people have and they obsess over, is when were dogs domesticated and are dogs wolves, you know?
right.
So I think that was like just looking at that general first title page, right? And the reading of it. It's basically, everybody, if you're still wondering, dogs are not wolves, you know. Um, ancestors sort of branched off at some point, and dogs are a species of their own. Um, but there's this obsession, which I don't know. I'm a dog lover, but I've never really obsessed about it. Like, when were dogs domesticated? It seems like a long, long time ago. Um, but based on archaeological finds that was put in the book, that it's a lot earlier than people thought, you know. And basically it's highlighting I think that the gist is, like, our love relationship with dogs. When did we start having them? And then when did we, also the question of when did we start breeding them selectively, um, for certain specific traits that, the people in those days in their geographical location really wanted out of their dogs as a working dog. Yeah. So that kind of like, okay, that's the historical thing that came out for me, you know.
Yeah. I like the history that was put in there to kind of give a little bit of a backstory on
Mm,
how we did evolve with them, how early the first paw prints were found, and we thought that they were domesticated, 15,000 years ago. Turns out it might have been 30,000 years ago, 130,000 years ago. They've
yeah,
been around for a long time. I
yeah.
don't know the earliest time that dogs were brought into the home. That's a whole other factor to look at, because a lot of times they were kept as farm dogs out in the field. It's been a while between the dogs being, you know, village dogs to farm dogs to snuggling with you in your bed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, even I would say, my parents' generation, you know, there are people who still view dogs as working dogs and not as pets. Like, a guard dog is a guard dog for outside the house. They're supposed to patrol the perimeter and defend the territory, kind of thing. They don't really want the dog inside the home snuggling with them. They don't have that. There's still quite a few people, especially I think in certain parts of Asia, that still has a pretty like very defined like line between with animals and pets. And even with
Mhm.
pets, I mean like I've met some hardcore people who pets should not even be pets, they should just be food kind of thing.
True, yeah. In some
Yeah.
cultures, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what this chapter also sort of briefly touched on was about the breeding of dogs. Um, because we were starting to select certain like traits that we liked in our working, like even border collies, especially, stuff like that, what we wanted. Um, and again, I think it sort of highlighted like when we did selective breeding, some things, undesirable stuff kind of happen in the genetics of the breeding, the selection of the gene pool, you know?
Uh,
Yeah,
German Shepherds don't look like German Shepherds anymore.
yeah,
They have like kind of a hunched back than what they used to have hundreds of years ago. And pugs are supposed to have a longer nose, and they've bred them to have such short nose. And
yeah,
I believe the term is brachycephalic. I
yeah,
might be saying that wrong.
yeah. So
Where it shortens that nasal passageway, and they have more nasal issues than other dogs because that whole function of the nasal cavity has been shortened over the years due to breeding because they wanted it to be a certain aesthetic appeal, but it can actually kind of harm the dog's bodily function in the long run.
yeah, I think one of the genetically like disturbed I don't know, what do you want to bred dogs is the bulldog. They can't even give birth naturally. They have to have cesarean apparently, and they've been bred in such a way that the folds of the skin and everything, it's really hard for them to have a normal dog active lifestyle. So, it's yeah, it sort of puts this question mark on our human intention of what we're doing. Like, are we, when we try to breed, are we being responsible breeders or ethical breeders? So that's another rabbit hole to go down, you know.
It's a big rabbit
Uh,
hole.
yeah, in fact, I later on in the book they actually do talk about like if you were to intend to buy a purebred dog or from a dog breeder, what sort of questions you should look out for. But that's like further down in the book.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so this chapter really talks about the history of our relationship with dogs and oh yeah, our obsession with DNA testing with some people. They want to test the genetics of the dogs and stuff, you know.
And there's that whole
So
debate of whether mutts are healthier or whether purebreds are healthier. Because I've heard
mm,
both sides. You
mm,
know,
yeah.
that's a rabbit hole as well.
Yeah, because I mean like I do rescue work. So I mean like for as long as I can remember, everyone said mongrels are always mixed breeds are healthier and hardier. But with, observing them, I don't know, past 10 odd years that I've been, actively involved in rescue work, um, that's not true. In fact, I think it doesn't matter whether you're mixed breed or not. Actually, dogs in general, overall, their health today, they have a lot of issues. And it sort of boils down to what are you feeding your dog in a very simplified approach. Like, okay, let's look at your lifestyle, you know?
Right. Yeah. What are you feeding? What's their environment? What are they coming in contact with? What
Yeah.
sort of lifestyle factors are setting off those genetics? Because you can have genetics and they can stay dormant, but until they come in contact with certain foods, certain chemicals, certain toxins, they can flip those switches and then make those genetic things rise up.
Yeah, what I like about this book, and this chapter is that because, they're talking a lot with, like a functional health approach to longevity for our dogs. And they do actually talk about certain topics like in terms of history and politics. So they talk a lot about like mass migration and agriculture through our human evolution, right? Our history with agriculture and stuff. And then they link it up with diet, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and basically, like here it says diets are cornerstones of disease and conversely health, right? which was actually printed in bold here. So, they sort of like, okay, how we eat, we humans, we obsess about our diet and, what's the best diet and lifestyle for us to be healthy. But there is a disconnect somehow when it comes to our dogs, and even some, even in, say, the pet health industry for humans, like doctors and all that, physicians, they'll tell you, like, with the human, try and eat as fresh as you can, eat a variety of food, right? Whereas for the pet food industry, they say, like, here, this bag of kibble is fortified with, the vitamins and minerals or whatever that the dog needs for life, and you know, have that, don't change it. So it sort of, brings up that question mark and the disconnect, like, okay, why is the human industry telling us to eat fresher, but why is the pet food industry telling us to don't eat fresher? In fact, I mean, like, I've had I've heard of vets actually say, like, don't cook your dog food, don't give your dog anything from your table, from your kitchen. Just take it from our clinic in a nice bag, you know.
Yeah. Well, and they always would stress, you don't want to cause GI upset. So they can kind of like startle the pet owner at first. Be like, well, I don't want to cause GI upset. I don't want to deal with the ramifications of that. So I'll just stick with what works. And granted, processed pet food will keep the dog alive, but at what cost down the road, and where it makes you think. And I think that was one of the turning points for me. And that's the hardest part to get across, I think, when explaining it to people, why fresher food is better than processed food. And when I started to hear rumblings about fresher food, you're just like, well, okay, that's weird, but you're right. We're told processed food is better. Don't change anything for our pets. But when you actually take a second and you open that bag of food and you look at these little brown balls, where is the chicken exactly? Where is that broccoli exactly? Where is that corn stalk that's on the front of the packaging? Like, how did all this turn into a little brown ball? And we're taught that these little brown balls are fine to feed them. But when you and that's the disconnect. And it's so hard to kind of like mesh that, to explain it to people. And that once you realize that the brown balls really aren't all they're cracked up to be, and you're just like, holy moly, then that light bulb goes off, and then you can kind of it's like, it's okay to add fresh food. It's okay. You cannot go wrong with adding a little bit of, fresh diet, whether it be blueberries or leafy greens or anything like that, because it really is the cornerstone of our health. What's the quote that comes to mind? A step of, I know I'm going to totally botch this quote because I've seen it so many times, but it's been a while. Eating fresher is one step in the right direction away from disease. You can, no, cut that out because I totally screwed it up. But I forget. Oh, that's going to bug me now. It's totally going to bug me. Eating fresher
You're
is a
gonna
step.
find, yeah, you're gonna find out, and you're gonna come back to that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the thing is, with this chapter, what they are doing, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is that they are priming the reader, especially those who've never thought about this question mark about what's in our animals' pet food. Is it really, really healthy? They are actually, educating us on the human history of agriculture and the food industry.
Yeah.
Like, and the correlation of when we started to grow our own food, the commercial stuff, and, like, and about the health benefits of eating fresh. So like, they mentioned people like Dr. David Sinclair, and how food is the information for our cells and tissues all the way down to their molecular structure. So when it's, the more processed it is, the more you're altering I would say, the nutritional benefits that the food can give you, when you consume it.
Right.
and they talk about BDNF, and I have to say the first time I heard this, I was really fascinated because BDNF is brain derived neurotropic factor, and it talks about how a pro-inflammatory diet heavy with refined carbohydrates, right, would decrease the activity of an important gene related to brain health called BDNF, and this is something, when I read about this, not just Dr. Becker talks about this, but like a lot of functional um, human doctors in the proactive health industry, they talk about BDNF and how, your brain, like we could actually improve our mental faculties, and our energy just by tweaking what we're eating. And that's when they sort of introduce the concept of what is carbohydrates, because
Mm-hmm.
this is a big opening, I think, for pet parents who have honestly never thought about this thing. You know, they I mean, like, even for myself, I thought carbohydrates are all the same. I never really thought what refined carbohydrates, there are different types of carbohydrate. And when I started to read that, I was like, oh shit, you mean there's so many
Uh-huh.
different types, and what sugar, what glucose?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah,
So
and the low glycemic vegetables and the higher glycemic vegetables and like slow carbs and fast carbs, which ones kind of fill you up and stick with you, which ones you kind of burn through faster. It's a whole
yeah,
world, man.
yeah. Yeah, so I would say they're easing the reader, the pet parent, into this idea of like, okay, if you agree, if you understand the concept of humans and a fresher food diet, and then we're looking at carbohydrates, and things that affect um, our, they call, gene expression, or, nutrigenomics, epigenetics kind of thing. Um, then you can sort of filter it down towards like, okay, if you understand these basic concepts, like, how do you think it will affect your animal's diet with what
For
you are
sure.
feeding your pet, you know? So, it's a great I don't know, I thought that they were, pretty good at explaining it really like slowly, baby steps to it.
Yeah,
And
it's very digestible, very easy to understand. Even if you have to maybe reread the paragraph a little bit just to kind of let that sink in, but it is very digestible.
yeah, and they, because they were talking about, the three main categories of carbohydrates, like sugar, starches, and fiber, what sort of affects that, what is that? And I always remember this part where, dogs don't need sugar because they can make their own sugar if you feed
Right?
them protein. And there was
That's
this
right.
big word that came out, right? And it's called gluconeogenesis. All right.
Yep.
So, that one line is sort of like, yeah, man, like I wish someone told me that like donkey years ago because I didn't know that. You know.
Yeah.
So
That was crazy to learn, wasn't it? That was really
yeah.
crazy.
So that's when I slowly, when I started to read and find out more, like, oh, you mean there's good carbs and bad carbs even for dogs? You mean it's the same, it affects the same with like how they talk about the human health diet? You mean it's the same for our companion dogs, So it's like, yeah, it's like, priming us to, get ready for like, let's go down that rabbit hole soon,
Yeah. It's a little bit of a run through of a nutrition kind of understanding to figure out and understand why food is so important, what are good foods, what are bad foods, and how the effect they have on the body. And that's important to know, not only for ourselves but for our pets as too. We just can't assume that, feeding them a cereal based form is going to be the best thing. We know that eating fast food for us is not the best thing every day, but we do it to our dogs unintentionally without realizing it because it's how we grew up. It's what we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a nutrition uh education.
Yeah, it's there's no easy way to go around it, I'm afraid. You have to sort of understand the basic concepts, and they do mention like, they sort of say like, well, if once you know how pet food is actually processed and made, especially dry food kibble, you might want to really like question the how healthy it is
Right.
for your animal. If you understand these basic concepts that they are setting up for you to understand, like the basic foundation stuff. And I mean, like a very simple thing for, it's like I cannot, it took me a very long time, but I realized I can't take bread, especially like white bread, processed
Mhm.
bread, because of the refined, the way they make it. And
Mhm.
every single pastry shop, they have to add sugar and everything, including bread. And the sugar really affects me. And I had just yesterday, because it was like, it's a long holiday weekend here, because it's today's Hari Raya Puasa, where it's the breaking of the Muslim fast, the fasting month, Ramadan. And it's also Labor Day on the 1st of May over here. So people, it's a public holiday. So it's like, so people are like eating and enjoying. So I thought, okay, we'll get into the spirit of the festive season here. So I had some curry, chicken curry, and it was like with some bread, and it was white bread. And today my stomach is so bloated because I haven't had bread in a really long time. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll have that. Oh, that's some leftover bread. Okay, I'll have some, some eggs with mayo with it, and just eat that, as a snack. But today my stomach, it was so hard and bloated, and it's been a long time since I had that, and because like I'm kind of being more conscious of what I'm eating, and I know what I ate yesterday, so I was like, yeah, I know what triggered it. It's the food that I ate, unfortunately, as much as I, liked it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Culturally, with your friends. But yeah, it actually did something to my stomach. And today I was feeling, oh, like I didn't feel good because I was so gassy and hard and bloated. And I was just thinking, because of today's call, the carbohydrate stuff, right? Can you imagine our dogs eating kibble and how
What they
they
must feel like.
and we don't even ask them like, how are you feeling, or people always say, oh, my dog farts so badly, my dog's farts are really smelly, why does my dog fart so much, you know
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, these unconscious questions in the past, now when I'm reading this book, I'm like, it's the food,
Uh-huh.
it's the food, it's the carbohydrates, my friends, it's the stuff that they're putting inside, so yeah. Yeah, I think today, regardless of whether you have a purebred or a mixed breed or whatever you want to call a designer breed dog, um, one of the top, I think, issues that most dog owners face and vets will say is skin ear issues.
Yes, it's very popular.
Yeah,
Very, very popular. And that can be very much food related, environmentally too, but very much food related.
yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. So I don't know. Is there anything else from this chapter that you kind of want to highlight?
I like the part where they point out that junk foods are bad. I mean, we kind of touched on that,
Mm,
but I like that they highlighted it to say that the ultra processed products are made to be hyper palatable and attractive to the dogs so that they crave it. They unknowingly will, not necessarily unknowingly, they'll crave food just like you have that craving for a bag of potato chips every so often. If you're hungry and there's a bag of potato, you are starving, you've had a long day, you want food, you're going to eat that bag of potato chips because they are
I
delicious.
I am a recovering chip or crisp, as we call it in the UK, a crisp addict. You know, like seriously, I that was my Achilles heel, my kryptonite kind of thing. I wasn't so much into sweet desserts or sugary stuff, but give me a bag of chips,
Yeah. And when
Dorito.
you're starving, yeah, when you're starving and you just want something, you'll take it. And I noticed that over the years with the dogs I've had and seeing people with other dogs or videos of dogs, they will eat anything because it is food that's put in front of them. And those palatizers and the flavor enhancers that are in kibble that a lot of people don't realize are put in there, because the actual smell of kibble before those flavorings are added really isn't great. I think it was Steve Brown who talked about it when he was at one of the manufacturing facilities for somewhere. I don't know if it was before he formulated or after. He'd taken his dog down with him to the manufacturing plant and pulled, like, the kibble wasn't done being processed. It was almost done. It was before it had the flavorings added. He took it off the line and handed it to his dog, and the dog smelled it, and the dog was like, because it was just, dogs would go after whatever. It wasn't until after the flavorings were added that Steve realized, oh, this is what is attracting them. And I said, what is it? I believe it's in, I don't know if it's in this chapter or if it was in the first chapter.
No, I think it's in this chapter. I think it's palatizing, palatants, or whatever you call it.
But they add in like putrescine and cadaverine, and she even said that you don't want to know what it is. The words explain it all. But supposedly, allegedly, there's putrescine and cadaverine that can be added to some kibbles to enhance the smell of it and the flavorings of it to make them attracted. So the dogs are going to eat whatever's put in front of them. And you hear that a lot. They're like, oh, well, my dog loves this food. Well, your dog will love a raw steak as well if you give it to them, because they're going to choose that too.
Yeah. So they sort of highlight the fact that dog food is even more processed than any human food on the market for us, and it's what they put in those additives. Really, it's all chemical stuff to make it taste yummy. I call it like the MSG. It's all the fake chemicals. It's just to wet tongue and to make it, and the salt and everything is to make them eat more.
Yeah, it happens in the human food industry. All that lovely aisle of crackers and chips and the candy aisle. If you dig far enough, you can find videos where the manufacturers will say what they put into their food to make it taste so delicious and keep you coming back for more. Same thing happens with pet food.
Yeah. So
there's a reason why we like the fast food, flavorings and the drive-through and all that stuff. But yeah, there is a convenience factor of it, but we have that choice as humans to make the choice whether to go to McDonald's or go to, the farm market or the grocery store produce section and get things. Our dogs don't always have that option. I believe it is talked in this chapter as well that they don't have much choice. They're offered what we give them. We are the sole, person giving them their food. Like I said, they're going to eat what's put down in front of them because they are hungry. They know they need food. They either want it for breakfast and dinner or once a day, however many times a day you feed your dog, but they are hungry and they want food, but they don't have a choice, and they're going to eat what we give them. So we need to be able to be educated enough to know what we can do better to kind of enhance their bodily functions and molecular structures, and use that good food as information for their cells.
Yeah, and because since you mentioned as well, because our dogs have no choice in the matter of how they live as well, and modern day dogs, especially those who are living in urban city environments like I am, we spend most of our time indoors now. Like where I live is a high-rise apartment, and I don't even have a balcony. I don't have a backyard. We don't. It's like I have to consciously bring my dog downstairs several times a day to give her walks, to pee on the grass, let her do a toilet business, sniff around. And what is scary is that a lot of tiny, tiny dogs, toy dogs, some of them have never even walked on grass nowadays, and I have seen it in my estate because a lot of people like to put the doggy shoes on all the time. It's not just for extreme weather conditions, like say in North America where you might have, snow or hot summer, or the terrain is rough where you want to have an extra protection for the animal, because of the extreme weather conditions. But in Singapore, where it's basically a tropical, we're like 1 degree north of the equator, really.
Oh wow, yeah.
So we basically live in a hot, humid climate. I think it's the closest I would say is like Florida kind of weather, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I have seen especially toy dogs because they're so small they can be accessorized with costumes. And I'm not saying it's anything bad, it's your choice and it could be fun, right? And I think they can be cute. But some of these dog owners are so germophobic because they believe in, we talked about it last week as well, like, people like it very, very super clean, you know. They put the shoes on the dog, so the dog is always wearing shoes. And they
Yeah. And
don't
they're not
like the
getting
dog,
exposed. Yeah.
yeah, and the dog doesn't, and some dog owners don't even like walk their dogs. I mean, like I have a resident who actually hand carries his dog all the
Hmm.
time.
Wow.
Yeah, like very seldom is the dog actually put on the floor, you know, and it's a tiny dog. And this dog has a lot of skin issues, and we've tried to, help him and say like, maybe you can try and freshen up the food a bit, because
Yeah.
he was feeding a lot of prescription diet and medication, and he was complaining that whatever the vet, he's spending so much money at the vet, but nothing is helping the dog. So we said
Hmm.
like, well, maybe you want to try some steamed fish like salmon or something just a little bit different. And when he made that tweak, he actually gave us feedback that, oh, the dog skin is improving. And guess what? The dog used to have was infamously known as a very reactive barky dog. Like every time you see the dog, it's forever barking and wah, 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 tiny dogs with that loud barking thing that's really annoying. And every time she saw my dog, always like even across the traffic light. Wah, 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 wah. So once we tweaked the diet just a little bit, right, with some fresher food, and we did say some like mackerel or salmon for the omega-3 kind of thing, he actually said the skin inflammation was less red, less itchy, and the dog was less barky, was
Nice.
less grumpy,
Yes.
you
Makes
know.
such a difference. And you can't even, you could explain it all day long, but until you actually see the improvement and the owner sees the improvement, they're like, oh, okay. Because if he was just getting kind of like band-aids to cover up some of the symptoms the dog was having, it's
Mm,
only going to last for so long, and that dog is still going to be grumpy if she's not feeling 100%. So yeah, changing the diet and
yeah,
reducing the inflammation, you'd feel a little less grumpy too.
yeah. I mean, like I have eczema. I live with eczema, so it's like it's triggered by all sorts of things, stress being one of them. Environmental stuff sometimes. So it's like I know the feeling when it's so inflamed because I've scratched until the whole thing is raw. So I can imagine how the poor dog is because it's been like that for years,
Yeah.
for
And to have
years.
such a have a quick kind of turnaround and changing the diet and adding something fresh. Yeah, there's a lot of
Mm,
people, a lot of stories I hear about people who just kind of might do one tiny little thing, and that's all it takes. It's just one tiny little thing, and you kind of see an improvement, and then that switch will click for them, and they're like, oh, there might be something to this. Like, yeah, there is. Or
yeah.
just you just want to help your dog live the best that they can, and that's what I love about this book is it is giving all these tips and tiny little tricks that are, like I said, easily digestible to understand it. You don't have to do everything at one time, just one little bit here or there to understand what kind of issue you might be dealing with. Or even if you're not, it's good to have understanding, talking about like learning about the BDNF and how stress and exercise can help, learning that
Mm,
food is information for your body, learning that junk food is not the best to have every single
yeah.
day, and
Yeah.
just
And
adding a few
and
little things.
yeah, and like environmental toxins, even Wi-Fi, 5G, Wi-Fi routers, you know, um, I think a lot of people, especially in Asia, the take up for 5G mobile phones is extremely high. I haven't upgraded my iPhone. My iPhone is like iPhone 7, still. It's a really old clunky little thing that is still surviving, you know. But if you're into what's modern technology, as they call it, like keeping up with the Joneses, 5G phones in Asia is actually a big thing. It's like pretty common now, I think. They're pushing for it really, really hard. I haven't upgraded anything in my home for 5G router yet. And mine is still like, the 2, 3, and what do they call it, 4, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but what I hear, about 5G Wi-Fi routers and how it's like very disruptive, even for like animals who are so they don't even want to be near it, it kind of scares me because it's like I live in a small apartment. I think um 72 square feet. I'm really bad with my numbers when it comes to metrics or whatever it's called. But it's a very tiny apartment, right? And basically my Wi-Fi is on the whole time because I work at night and my flatmate works during the day, and it's kind of like we just leave it on, you know, and we don't really think much about it. Plus, it's such a small place. We're literally living in a little tiny box, and with 12 cats and one dog, it's kind of cozy, right? But when you read about, how electronics and technology can also disrupt your epigenetics, your body health wise, it um even for me, I'm still trying to grapple like what can I do, what like really a new habit, switch off the Wi-Fi, which is like that that
But
that something is different for me,
yeah,
I
and
have
even
to
think about
say.
that too, because it's going to be different for someone like you in a high-rise apartment, and
Mm,
there's plenty of cities and plenty of people who live in downtown high-rise apartments or even just apartment complexes. Even if you turn off your Wi-Fi, is your
my
neighbor turning off the
yeah,
Wi-Fi? Is the person above you turning it off? Is the person
yeah,
below you? Because you know that those waves can reach quite a bit. We have
yeah,
Wi-Fi on the other side of the house and it can reach my bedroom, you know.
yeah, yeah.
But
So
it's
it's
going to be
yes.
different for everywhere. But yeah, especially with like the 5G, I've seen people talk about how harsher that can be. I haven't
Mm,
seen any personal effects myself. I don't have 5G yet, but
mm,
I've
mm,
I've heard people talk about how it can be a little bit more harmful to our bodies,
mm,
and how is that affecting our dogs? So they even say you should turn off your Wi-Fi at night for yourself
yeah,
as well, and,
yeah,
and Dr. Becker and Rodney say that we should turn it off for our dogs and our pets because it can affect them as well. But yeah, living in a high rise is going to be different than someone who might have
yeah.
internet living on a farm. I
It's
like that we can
different.
have those comparisons,
Yeah,
being in how we live in different worlds, but um, it's good to think about how other people live in situations and doing what you can for your dog. But yeah,
mm,
I didn't think about that before with the whole Wi-Fi thing. Is like, how do people deal with that when you live in a closer living capacity in apartments and high
yeah,
rises? Definitely
yeah.
more difficult in that sense.
And I tell you, like every cat, I mean, like my cats like to snuggle and sleep on the damn router itself because it's warm, right? The TV thing, and they just go snuggle and they will sleep there, and I'm like, and I'm like, am I giving like radioactive, you know, like, oh no, I'm doing something which I shouldn't be doing, you know. So I think honestly, and this is something I do think about, but I haven't actively like tried to change my lifestyle about my use of technology at home because really like my phone picks up like they say like, oh, you've got Wi-Fi
Yeah.
notifications from all around, or like, like, oh, do you want to join this network? I'm like, no, I don't want to fucking join your network, you know. But yeah, when we live in a high-rise, very dense population, it really is difficult to run away from that Wi-Fi thing, you know.
Yeah.
I would say that I haven't actively even tried to switch off my thing because the way my TV and power switches are all set up is like inside an alcove kind of thing, and I had to put my hand in and switch off everything. So it's
Yeah.
like, maybe in future, like if I was to renovate my home, I might want to design a switch to switch off everything. Because there's this guy called Eric Edmeades. He's like a business speaker kind of thing, right? And he actually does WildFit. It's this like health food program, and he actually said he actually has one power switch that he designed for his bedroom where he just switches off that switch and all electronics get switched off in his house, in his bedroom.
Oh, good idea.
you know so I'm like, okay, that's something like in my future renovation I might actually think about doing that. But because my home, I've lived here for almost like I think 20 years now, um it's kind of decrepit. you know I would say it's well lived. It's a well lived home. you know there are some cobwebs here and there. Yeah.
We all have cobwebs. Don't fret.
Yeah, yeah. So, so the idea of, especially in an urban environment, our companion dogs are living a very insulated environment nowadays, depending on where you live. And so to be more consciously aware, like what are the little factors that might help to improve and enrich the dog's environment, you
Mhm.
know, is important, you know. So
Yeah. Even like you
ma
said, even in someone in your situation, you have to take that time to take them downstairs several times a day. Even if you, depending on where you live, even if you live in a house, you still need to get your dog outside, in the
mm,
backyard, let them touch the earth. You don't necessarily have to take them on a walk every single day, although that's ideal. But, let them get outside, get that sunshine. Don't keep them cooped up because that's not natural for them at all. Like you were saying, those tiny little dogs that never get to go outside or touch real grass, how is that
mm,
affecting them in the long run? It's important that we give them those choices to be able to experience those natural things they should be experiencing.
yeah, and yeah, so this chapter sort of starts to introduce you to the concept of the microbiome as well, you know,
Mm,
because we were talking about environmental enrichment and the soil and the earth and the ground and the microbiome and gut health. So they sort of slowly ease you in on the concept of, what is a microbiome, kind of thing, and that sort of leads into, the next chapter, um, which we will talk about next week, which is the science of aging.
very important to
Mm,
understand, and how that rolls into how can we make them live longer and healthier.
mm, yeah. So I don't know. So what do you think, my friend? Have we kind of covered this chapter more or less, like the highlights that you want to bring out?
You
Mm.
want to talk about how they're polluted with chemicals, or did we already kind of
Oh, wait a
do
minute.
that
My
enough
cat's,
already?
hang on, my cat's on my laptop. Are we still
Uh-oh.
recording? Okay, stay away. Okay, yeah. All right, I think we're still recording. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that again? I completely missed you when my cat was
Oh no,
all
you're
over there.
fine.
Yeah.
There's one part I have highlighted about the house chemicals where American pets are polluted with higher levels of
Mm,
many of the same synthetic industrial chemicals that researchers have documented in people, um, where they did the samples of blood from 28 dogs and 37 cats,
mm.
and dogs and cats were contaminated with 48 of 70 industrial chemicals tested.
Yes. 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 Again, yeah, these big words started to come up. So, they talk about, the chemicals in our homes, like on our furniture, our fire retardants and stuff. How our animals are absorbing these stuff a lot higher than us, simply because they're smaller mass, cats and dogs, cats especially, because they like to sleep on the furniture and stuff. So the food that they eat with glyphosate, those chemicals in the agriculture business that they sort of like kill all the bugs kind of thing, and you know, um, our dogs, it's in the urine. That was something that really like okay,
Mm-hmm.
is showing up. All these chemicals, toxins are coming up in their urine. So can you imagine? What about us?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. What are we coming into contact with? Think about it for us as well. When, and having a dog or a cat that's in a much smaller body,
Yeah.
with their food being stored in plastic bins, coming in contact with heavy metals, fire retardants that are sprayed on couches and furniture. I know one tip that Karen Becker has talked about is if you do have a couch or furniture, things that are sprayed with fire retardant, is get like an organic cotton sheet and throw that over your couch. That's one easy tip. If you can find an organic dog bed, go for it. But those may not be feasible for everyone to find, rather quickly. But
Mm,
they are out there. They do exist. But one thing you can do is even if the dog bed you have or the couch you have, just take an organic cotton sheet and throw it over there and kind of limit that contact of the skin and the hair coming in contact with the fire retardant sprayed on some of those things, because that has an effect too. And that's something I never thought about before, till
I
reading it in
have
the book.
never thought about it, I'll be honest, and it kind of horrifies me because you know how when you have a home, we take a lot of these things fire retardant. It's like the norm, or it
Yeah.
is considered a good practice that, oh, you've got furniture that's fire retardant, or my curtains or my blinds are fire retardant, you know. Um,
It has its
I
place, but it also, you don't want to lay on it all the time either.
Yeah, and it really, hit home to me the fact that we are unconsciously living in a very toxic home without us actually realizing what these chemicals are causing to our bodies,
Yeah.
you know.
And think about it, we can take a shower every day. Even if you lay on the couch and
Mm,
or come into contact with metals and chemicals and you know paint or gasoline, whatever we deal with on a day-to-day basis, we can go home and take a shower. Our dogs and cats usually get a shower or a bath like once a month, every 6 weeks or so,
yeah,
depending on how frequently you wash them. But they're not getting a shower or a bath every single day to wash off the day's
yeah,
contact with fabrics and
yeah,
chemicals and toxins.
yeah.
So they will absorb that. One thing I wanted to point out that the book said was there was a study of samples of blood done from 28 dogs and 37 cats, and it
Mm,
found that dogs and cats were contaminated with 48 of the 70 industrial chemicals tested. So they tested their blood and urine samples, and they had 48 chemicals in their system out of the
yeah,
70 that they tested. And that's a lot. And we don't realize that that's accumulating in their bodies over time.
yeah, yeah. So, I would say this chapter is priming the reader for, slowly opening the curtain and really like highlighting these things that, to be honest, I've never actually really seriously thought about. I took a lot of things for granted. And, you know, um, I mean, very simple, like when I bought, like years ago, when I bought my new blinds in my home, I wanted to go with something different where they can print photos, images on the blind, like a
Oh,
roller blind,
cool.
well, on canvas, right? So I chose some images. I thought, oh, it's so nice. But when it came up, the off gassing from the print smell was really, really strong. And I didn't think much about it. I just thought like, oh, I need to air this a lot longer, right? I need to open the windows and air. But now when I'm reading things like this in the book, and I'm like thinking, gosh, can you imagine? At least I get the option of leaving my house, when there's a paint job being done. But if you say you don't um, remove your pets during like a paint job or renovation, simple like that, or simple installation, so the chemicals are there and you need to air them. Your animals are breathing it in still,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know. And yeah, so for me, it was like a big like, like, oh wow, I got really nice, cool blinds, and I'm looking at it now, but like, I did not think um about how it might affect my animals during
Yeah.
the initial period.
There's tons of little things like that it's not to overwhelm the reader, but just to
Mm,
make the reader aware
yeah,
that everything really is toxic, and it's not to be a fearful thing or any
mm,
fearful induced statements. It's that the more we know, the better we can do. If we know that things are toxic, what are the little steps that we can do to kind of get something that's not as toxic?
mm,
Little tips, whether it be, like I said, throwing a bed sheet over something, you know, being aware of what fragrances and smells you're using in the house, being aware of everything that you and your pets can come into contact with, and what choices we can make to do little things better to help ourselves live healthier and help our pets live longer as well, and not have to like you said, they don't get the choice in a lot of things, so we need to do what we can for them as much as we can, as best as we can.
yeah. So I would say, reading this book, especially for new time pet parents, if it's like really like first time you're reading this kind of information, you might start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, but just take it slowly, and just realize like, okay, now you know better. So just start like finding little tweaks that you can to improve within your budget, honestly. So like what you mentioned about, just an organic bed sheet, cotton bed sheet over your furniture, that's not going to cost you a total arm and a leg. But if you can't afford organic, well, just a cotton bed sheet is
Yeah,
still better
yeah.
than nothing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I do because I've got animals on my furniture, right? So I just throw, the bedspreads or whatever over, and then I wash them.
Mm-hmm.
I wash them regularly because, I live in the tropics and it gets pretty hot and lots of animal fur. But yeah, so for it's beneficial for both the humans and the animals. These little tweaks that you do, when you're
Yeah.
more conscious. Yeah.
And just being aware when you go to the store to buy things, if you're going to bring in, some sort of cleaning agent of any
Mm,
kind, there's all kinds of natural recipes you can find. A lot of people will clean with vinegar.
yeah,
There's easy
I do that.
mixtures you can find, yeah, recipes online. There's a lot of new companies coming out with, actual non-toxic cleaning ingredients. It's to be more mindful of when you're buying new products to bring in your home, whether it's, like I said, cleaning ingredients, whether it's new carpet, new furniture, being mindful of what's in those, and asking a little bit of questions. I had to be careful when I got new carpet in my bedroom for my birds. I know that new carpet is toxic to birds. They have to be removed from the room for about two
Mm,
weeks because I
mm,
believe it's formaldehyde that is in
mm,
there. So I knew that already, but if you get new carpet in the home, what is that off-gassing smell doing to your dog or your cat
right.
who can smell like 10,000 times better? What effect
Yeah.
does that have on them? And you might see zero effect because you've got a super happy, bouncy dog, but it's still off-gassing. So it's just little things like that to be a little bit more mindful of that I like that the book
Yeah.
will point out and give little
Yeah.
nuggets of information to be like, oh, okay, so if I know this project is coming up or I want to do this, or next time I go to the grocery store and I need you know, your typical bottle of counter cleaner, what can I do to look for something that might be a little less toxic
Yeah.
that I can bring into the home?
Yeah. One group that they mention in the chapter is the EWG group, which is the Environmental Working Group. So that's actually they have a website that you can go to and just, talk which because they talk about their thing is all about the environment and toxins and chemicals, right? So they give you healthy alternatives as well, or what to look out for. So if you are starting this journey, that is a one website that you want to start familiarizing yourself with. Um, for the long term. But yeah, it's this chapter when they talk about BPA, all these scientific plastics and chemicals, right? It's like wow, I honestly never really thought about these things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start reading the book, you realize that PCB, BPA, oh my God, these are actually in a lot of everyday stuff that we take for
Yes.
granted. So, you're doing yourself a favor and your family a favor by, finding out a lot more about these things because there is, more and more cases where our children, the younger generation, they are getting more sickly for some reason. And a lot of the time is actually linked to all these environmental toxins that we are exposing ourselves to, and then it's passed down, you know, um, even through pregnancy into the child
Mm-hmm.
as well. Yeah. So yeah, mm, I think. What do you think? Kind of covered today's chapter pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think we touched on a little bit of everything off of every page.
Mm, yeah. I mean, like for the Singapore listeners, there's actually a mention in this chapter about an experiment study that was done between a research group from Switzerland and Singapore, in 2019 about testing healthy beagles and stuff. We sort of touched on that very quickly just now. So it's like, yeah, so, for the Singapore listeners, our country is mentioned in here. Um, So you want to find out more, go to page 42 and check it out. Yeah. But yeah, this I would say like each chapter, if you read one chapter a day kind of thing, it's not so difficult. Even if it's once a week, if you're super, super busy, it won't be too overwhelming. Gives you some time to think about things as well. So yeah. So well, I think we've covered enough for today. So I want to thank Shana again for being my book buddy, because she's far brainier and a lot more savvier than I am about all this information, because she basically has lived it, written it, and been part of this project for like quite a few years now. So it's in her blood subconsciously, and it's all coming out slowly now.
Slowly, yes. But it's all in there. It is all in
Yeah.
there.
Wow, I'm so thankful and grateful that you took the time to listen to this podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe, download, rate, review, and share this with others whom you care about that may enjoy it as well. Thank you, and remember to be kind to yourself and others. Have a awesome day, everyone.